Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Unpopular Opinion. And today I'm really excited to have my first ever series on this podcast. And before we go further, I want you to please subscribe to my YouTube channel so that whenever I post a new video, you'll be the first person to be notified. And I'm not excited to talk about the topic today, which is Sudan. There has been a global outcry against wars happening around the world. And if you check the news feed, you can observe that some wars has been greatly covered while some do not get covered. So as a result of that, people don't get to know what is happening because there is less information concerning those things happening. And let's say, for instance, the Ukrainian and the Russian war have had a very great presence on all of our media platforms, on all of the social media platforms, on all of the various news channels like Al Jazeera, CNN, wherever you go. And the Israel genocidal war against the Palestinian people, it's all over the news, all over social media, on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, everywhere you go, you find information concerning those wars, the Ukrainian and the Russian war. So, coming to the war in Sudan, you don't really get to hear much about it when it comes to the media, whether be it social media or on the mainstream media, you don't really get to know much about it. So I think it is now time, and it is our responsibility as a young people, as young Africans, to be able to come up to share light on some of those things that are happening so that we can be able to make a better decision for our future. The war in Sudan, it is humanitarian catastrophe, and this catastrophe is being caused by two warlords in Sudan. These two generals are Hamiti and Burhani, and the war in Sudan have killed over 15,000 people as of date of the recording of this video, and have made over 15 million people displaced or refugees. So that is something that we need to talk about. And when you check various media institutions, you don't really see much being said about it. And people are dying every day. So the question is, how did we get to this point in Sudan? We go back and see what happens. That is Umar al-Bashir. Umar al-Bashir was the president of Sudan between 1989 to 2019. Prior to his presidency, Sudan would only boast of one bridge in the entire country that was used to cross the Nile River. Before he left power, Sudan had over 8 bridges in the country. When he took over, Sudan had around 100 medical centers. And today, before leaving power, Sudan can boast of over 600 medical centers in the entire country. When he took over, Sudan had 3 universities in the country. Before leaving in 2019, the country had over 100 universities in the country. I'm not saying that he was doing good. No. And I'm not here to defend him. And I am not here to defend some of the human rights abuses he committed while he was president. But it is good for people to understand where he took Sudan from and where he put Sudan today. In 2017, Sudan had begun to experience economic crisis because of the sanctions that has been imposed on the country for over 30 years. So ATM machines were not working anymore, or they were working but not really working good, because when you put your ATM card into the ATM machine, you don't get back enough cash. So the circulation of currency in the country was limited, which resulted into popular revolt against the government. In order to have currency flow, the government then decided to institute a policy where they desubsidize gas. And when gas was desubsidized from 1 Sudanese pound to 5 Sudanese pound, the people took to the street and protested. Yet the economic crisis was still going on, it was still looming. The government now decided to desubsidize bread as well, because bread is considered as the staple food in the country. So the government desubsidized bread. So the people got very agitated and they demanded for change. They demanded that the government put back the subsidies, which was on the bread and on the gas. As things goes on like that, economic crisis was clear. The people started demanding for change in government in all the various capitals in Sudan, including Khartoum. Umar al-Bashir then now called Hamiti, that is currently being backed by the UAE and the US and its rapid support forces from the border of Sudan between Chad and Libya, because Umar al-Bashir considered the border between Sudan and Chad and Libya as a route through which the rebel gets supplies from to come and fight against the government. So the Rapid Support Forces was a military wing that was trained to be able to counter all of those things happening in that border region. As a result of that, information had it says that there were some elements within the army that were planning to make coup against Umar al-Bashir in case the protests continue to happen in the streets of Khartoum and in other major cities in Sudan. Burhani got tip of the intelligence. General Hamiti got tip of the intelligence. And Salah Ghosh. So Hamiti and Burhan, they joined together, and Salah Ghosh, who's now I think the prime minister or something like that. Hamiti, Salah Ghosh, and Burhan, three of them joined together. They made a coup against Umar al-Bashir. They overthrew al-Bashir. When they overthrew al-Bashir, quickly they realized that they cannot do anything to change the country because of the financial sanctions that are being imposed upon Sudan. The only country that can make investment in Sudan is the US. That's how they went to the UAE and they went to the US so that they could help them to remedy the situation in Sudan, because the financial crisis was real and they could not stop it. So the question that comes to mind is, how did Umar al-Bashir manage to run the country? I'm not saying he had a very good economy, but it was okay. So what the military did was to make concession with the political parties. And that concession was 69% members of the parliament should be appointed, not elected. They all agreed to disregard the constitution because they want to make certain changes within the constitution that are necessary for the United States and the UAE before they can make any investment in Sudan. And those changes include normalization tie with Israel, because Sudan is considered to be the land of the three no's: no to occupation, no to normalization, and no to colonization of Israel against the Palestinian people. The second priority was the restructuring of the Sudanese military, because they felt that in order to integrate Israel into the region, or the Zionist ideologies into the region, it is for the Arab militaries to be deconstructed or dismantled and restructured in a way they align with the interests of the West, namely the United States of America. So those were some of the concessions. And the last concession was removing Islam from the constitution, or removing the religious ideologies from the Sudanese politics. Because the Arab Spring in 2011 resulted into, like Egypt, like Tunisia, like Libya, leaning towards Muslim party or leaning towards Islamic parties. So if that ideology had continued, that means that the people of the UAE have the potential to revolt against the UAE tomorrow. And Ben Zayed know this. So in order to discourage this, the Sudanese people do not have the right to say who governed them or who ruled them. And that's why the constitution was neglected. That the parliament members should be appointed, not elected. Because in the opinions of Ben Zayed, he thinks that the people in the Middle East need economic prosperity, not freedom. They do not have right to choose who can be their leader. So they want to maintain their power at all costs. So whatever that will cause them to maintain that power, they will maintain the power. So going back to the issue of Burhan and Hamiti, after those concessions were made, the military ruled for 2 years and did not last with Israel, despite popular protest or revolt against that action by the government. They also went ahead and removed Islam from the constitution, despite popular revolt by the Sudanese people. They also went ahead and to change the banking system and introduce interest-based banking system in the Sudanese economy, despite popular revolt. The military, along the liberal parties or the political parties in Sudan, did all of those changes to the constitution because they did not need election to make those changes within the constitution. So after the 2 years elapsed, because the military and the political parties had made a concession that after 2 years they would turn power over to the civilian rule, the civilian rule would now go into the election and turn power over to a democratically elected government. The US was still adamant that after the normalization with Israel, after removing Islam from the constitution, and after the introduction of the interest-based banking system in Sudan, the US was still adamant that they still need to restructure the Sudanese army before they can make any investment in Sudan. The UAE also insisted that the Sudanese army need to be restructured before they can make any investment in Sudan. So those were the conditions, because the US and the UAE believed that the revolt that took Umar al-Bashir from power was not as a result of the political parties, was as a result of young people who are seeing the world in different lens through social media. So it was these young people that took to the street and demand for change because they wanted to see their country the same way other countries look like. They wanted freedom, they wanted liberation, they wanted to be liberated. So when that happened, the army and the political parties had that agreement. After the 2 years, the army now refused to turn power over to the political parties. When the army refused to turn power over to the political parties, because the US and the UAE had made it conditional that for any financial assistance to go to the Sudanese economy, the military need to be restructured, dismantled and restructured, because it has to align with the Zionist ideology in order to introduce Israel into the region. Because Israel cannot be introduced into the region with the army that has been fighting, or Israel's safety cannot be guaranteed by an army that has been fighting the Western ideology for the past 30 years. So Burhan understood this, and He insisted that he would not turn power over to the civilian. The civilian got agitated. When they got agitated, then the UAE came in and broke up a deal between the civilian and the military and informed them, say, you know that if we go to election, the army will not win the election and the EU political parties will not win the election, the Islamists will win. So the political parties knew that, and the army also knew that. So they brokered the peace deal between the political parties and the Sudanese army. Yet the political parties went to Hamiti and they spoke to Hamiti, telling him that this was the agreement and we want you to go and take over the power, destructure the Sudanese army, and made the rapid support forces the central core of the Sudanese army, or a model in which the Sudanese army can function. So Burhan got a tip of the intelligence, so he escaped. 30 of his men were killed, and that's how the war started. The UAE has been supporting the rapid support forces from the time the military took over, giving them ammunition, training them. They fought even in Yemen. So they've been trained by the UAE, backed by the US. So Burhan wants to take over the army. And Hamiti understands that if he leaves the power, it means that this social structure of Sudan will change. I'm not saying that Hamiti is defending Islam. No, I'm not here to defend Hamiti as well. But that's what he thinks. So as a result of that, what happened? And now we can see, when it comes to the issue of Sudan, the United States is very cold on speaking about anything that has to do with Sudan, because they believe that without change in the army, there is no way they can speak to the issue. And the UAE had made it conditional that the Sudanese government or the Sudanese army must be restructured, and that restructure must be done around Hamiti rapid support forces to model the military system in the West. Burhan understands that the restructuring of the army will lead to a problem, because the similar thing happened in Iraq. And up to date, we can see the Iraqi army is still not stable. Burhan understands this very well. So because of that, Burhan don't want to let power go. But then the UAE is supporting Hamiti very well to commit genocide against the Sudanese people. The UAE is using the border of Chad, giving ammunition, weapons to go and fight against the Sudanese people, against the Sudanese army. So the question that comes to my mind is, how was Umar al-Bashir able to survive the 30 years of sanction? How? Because if we think that Umar al-Bashir was the problem and he was a dictator, we can see that John Garang, who led rebellion against Umar al-Bashir government, was brought into power in 2005 in a power sharing agreement, making him the vice president to Umar al-Bashir. Umar al-Bashir was not happy with some of the things that happened, yet because he wanted peace in his country, he accepted that. He also allowed Jibril Ibrahim to be a member of the government. I believe he's the current finance minister, who also had his rebel group in another part of Sudan. Yet, despite all of these challenges, economic sanction, Umar al-Bashir was able to navigate his way by bringing all of these 23 political parties on board to form some form of coalition government and meeting his power. And the economy was doing, I can't say it was doing very good, but it was okay. Until the liberal politicians started their protests in 2019, ousted the government by the military. Now there's no Umar al-Bashir. They've taken over, and they cannot make the change that they think they would have made into the country. This is a scenario that is likely to happen. The US and the UAE will continue to support Hamiti and his rapid support forces, even if it means to share Sudan into two parts, where Hamiti will be able to establish an autonomous capital city in another part of Sudan. They will agree to that. So, where is the democracy? Now civilians are being killed everywhere. The US, who considers herself to be the policeman of the world, cannot say anything because they are in cahoots with the rapid support forces. So now here is a case of the Sudan. The Sudanese believe that their revolution has been hijacked. In their opinion, it was a revolution. The political parties, in their opinion, it was a revolution by the people. But in the mind of the West, namely the United States of America and the UAE, they believed that it was as a result of the sanction imposed upon Sudan for the past 30 years. So they want to dictate the condition of how the country should be ruled. So because of this reason, now we can see the war, no sign of ending, and it's continuing to happen. We see children dying, we see women being killed, we see massacre being committed by Hamiti and his rapid support forces. The Sudanese army is making gains, but those gains are not enough. I'm not supporting the Sudanese army in this case, but I'm simply trying to state the facts. So the UAE is continuously giving support to the Hamiti against Burhan. So the Sudanese revolution has been hijacked because, in their opinion, when election is organized, especially Ben Zayed of UAE believe that the Arabs do not need to choose who govern them. They need economic prosperity, because people, in one of his interviews, he said people who believed that 1,400 years old book should be their constitution, how can you give those people a choice to select their own leader? Because the Arab Spring in 2011 resulted into people leaning towards Muslim majority political parties, which brought Mohamed Morsi to power, and majority of the parliamentarian members in Egypt at the time was members of Muslim Brotherhood. The same thing happened in Tunisia, and the same thing happened in Libya. So they know, US and the UAE know, when there's election organized today, the liberal political parties will not win the elections. People will vote for the Muslim leaning parties. They will not care, they will vote for them. So in the minds of the US, Islam or religious ideologies should not be attached to politics. And that ideology is what they want to remove. So to conclude, the US and the UAE need to stop their support to the rapid support forces, Hamiti and his group. Call for ceasefire between the two parties, come to a power sharing agreement that will be binding by the both parties, including Hamiti and his rapid support forces, Burhani and the Sudanese army, and the liberal political parties. Come to an agreement that the war should come to an end, and there should be an election organized in Sudan, turn power to an elected democratic president. From there, you can dictate the term of the condition of how Sudan should be ruled or how Sudan should not be ruled. But you cannot continue to impose your will on the people, and you see children have been killed, women are killed everywhere, and yet On the other side, you're passing around calling yourself the policeman of the war, the peacemaker of the war. It is a shame for Ben Zayed to always be in this type of deal or be in this type of dealings, because we need to understand the Zionist objective can never be understood. That's the first thing we need to understand, because they fooled the Sudanese army. They told them if we remove Islam from constitution or religious ideology from politics, and if we establish interest-based economic system, we will come to the country and invest. But what happened? The economy is strangulating today. The price for which the Sudanese people took to the street in 2017, the gas, it was 5 Sudanese pound, but now it's more than 600 Sudanese pound. So the economy has been strangulated more and more further. So the UAE and the US need to stop their hypocrisy, call for peace. Starvation is taking place. Famine is looming. So we should sit back and watch the US and the UAE destroy Sudan? We should not speak about it? I think it is now time that we should speak about those things that are happening. The African Union has become a disgrace, because African Union should be the one to broker peace between these two warlords. Because the foundation for the African Union is to protect and defend the independence of an African country. And this war is happening. The African Union is making no effort to call for ceasefire, no effort to bring peace. It's a disgrace and it's a shame for the African Union to do this. So we as a young people, as a young African, we need to come up and speak to those issues. We need to make the world know what is going on. We need to speak truth to the power. Because if we cannot speak truth to the power, how do you think we can become a better leaders of tomorrow? So that is a question for you. What are you willing to sacrifice for Sudan? What are you willing for the cause of Sudan? What are you willing to give for the freedom of the people of Sudan? On this note, we've reached to the conclusion of today's podcast. And I'd like to say thank you very much. And I want you to subscribe to this YouTube channel for more updates so that you'll be notified whenever I post new video.